Welcome in, everybody. My name is Jason Elam. You are listening to the Good Neighbor Politics podcast. I'm so excited to be with you again this week. If you didn't catch our introductory episode last week, please do check it out. Kind of lets you know what this is all about. It's been a really weird couple of weeks in the United States of America, where I reside. Of course, we had the Charlie Kirk assassination, which there's a big uproar about on both sides of the political spectrum. Um, Me personally, I was never a fan of Charlie Kirk. I think he said some really hurtful, defamatory things about a lot of people. But at the same time, he's a human being, and no human being deserves to die the way that he died. And so I was mortified by what happened, just from the human aspect of it. Um, I feel terrible for his wife, Erica, for their two little kids, and for his parents, everybody who loved him. I feel awful about that. The memorial service took place this weekend, and it was interesting as well. Erica got up and made a really thoughtful, heartfelt presentation. You could tell that this whole situation has been devastating to her, which obviously it would be. Certainly nothing unusual about that. But her heart's broken, and you really felt for her watching her try to struggle through speaking at her husband's memorial, which I'm sure she never imagined doing this soon. She made some really powerful statements about forgiveness. She talked about forgiving the shooter because of what Jesus did for her and because of what Charlie would want and what he would have done if he were alive today. He would have forgiven the shooter, she said, which I found really powerful and moving. And that's the kind of grace we need in a moment like this, in a way, in a time when the assassination of her husband has been used to divide and enrage and infuriate so many people, to see others as the enemy who must be stopped or destroyed. I thought it was really powerful for her to say, "I forgive that man," and I thought that was really, really, really moving. Of course, President Donald J. Trump spoke at the service as well. He gave the eulogy. He didn't quote Charlie Kirk a lot. He talked about him, said some, things that I'm not sure he meant, in light of the statement last week when a reporter said, "How are you holding up? I know you were close to Charlie Kirk." And he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm doing great. Let me tell you all about the amazing ballroom we're building at the White House." He did not seem all that shaken up about it. But he shared a little bit about Charlie. He talked more about himself and the country and what, liberals are doing to destroy America, in his view. But then, he brought up what Erica had referred to earlier about forgiving the enemy and loving your enemy. And Trump said Charlie would love his enemy and he would choose to forgive. And that's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my enemy and I don't want the best for them. And I thought to myself, wow, that is a powerful statement about the leadership of this country right now. Now, listen, I understand, the reflexes to both sides, everything. And to a certain extent, you're right. Both parties have done things that made their perceived political enemies uncomfortable, and, done things that could have punished the other side politically in some ways. But for him to just publicly say, for the president of the United States to say, after spending 2 weeks talking about liberals are the enemy, Democrats are the enemy, they're violent, we must stop them, we must destroy them, whatever, talking about declaring war on American cities. And for him to say that, for the president of the United States to say that, just made me realize what a horrible condition our country's in right now. And then I started thinking about all the people who called themselves by the name of Jesus, who are following this man, who this man is their hero. And it made me think, today, I don't spend a lot of time on social media anymore. I used to a whole lot, but I've deleted some apps off my phone just to not spend so much of my life in that environment. I feel like it's toxic and it's not good for us. And I think that we should, get away from it as much as possible. But I did happen to manage to see on Blue Sky today that some preacher somewhere is predicting the rapture. And apparently that is based on a vision that this person had, this man, this preacher had, where Jesus told him that the rapture would take place, that the return of Jesus Christ would take place between September 23rd and 24th. And I guess that's because, it can be the 24th in Australia and the 23rd in the United States at the same time. And so I thought that was a level of detail most rapture predictions don't carry, right? Most of them say things like, well, October 1st is going to be the rapture. They don't usually say the 1st and 2nd because we don't think of it as a 2-day event, right? The rapture, it's supposed to be like this, the trumpet sounds and the skies part and Jesus and all the armies come forward. Some people imagine that to be, murderous, almost a sword coming out of his mouth, striking down the wicked and gathering the chosen, the elect into the clouds. After studying the Bible for 20 years as a pastor, I basically came to the conclusion that I don't think that the Bible actually talks about anything like that. I don't think that there's going to be a big triumphant return of Jesus in the sky where we all get snatched up to heaven to be with him. I don't believe in that at this point, but there is a rapture alert. And so I wanted to talk about it. Way back in 1988, there was a book, actually in 87, a book came out by a misguided prophet. And if you're not watching the video, I'm putting my fingers in quotations there. Who wrote a book called 88 Reasons Why Jesus Must Return by 1988. I don't remember that much. I was little. I was like 14 years old at that time. But that was a really popular book and a lot of people bought into it, and it wrecked a whole lot of people when it didn't happen. And just like back then, we're seeing that again today. Social media carries things around the world. People think everything they see a video of or every moving story they hear must be true. And so they put stock in these things. And so people are selling their cars. They're preparing for their unsaved family members to go on without them. Now, some have been having some fun with that. Instagram's full of that today. People prepping for their husband to be left behind or their kids to be left behind as they plan on going with Jesus over the next couple of days. And it's tongue in cheek and it's funny, and that's great. But I don't, as I've said, as I've already made clear, I don't believe that that's what's going to happen. So if you're listening to this on September 25th, and I was wrong, then I'm sorry I was wrong. I don't think that's going to be the case. Jesus himself said at one point, if you believe the biblical narrative, that no man knows the day or the hour. And so as soon as somebody announces the day, I'm like, well, that can't be it. Again, I don't really believe in the concept of a rapture. A young girl, I believe her name might have been Margaret McDonald. I'm not sure. I don't recall exactly. But the young girl had a vision, and that's where the whole modern rapture doctrine came from. She had a dream, and it got put into basically somebody started preaching it, and then Charles Scofield got a hold of those sermons and put them into the commentary in the Scofield Bible. And so it's become this whole thing that didn't exist in Christianity for hundreds of years. It's a fairly modern invention, this rapture. And what's surprising and what's really interesting about the whole rapture doctrine, if you believe in that, Matthew 24 in the Gospel of Matthew actually talks about a type of a rapture where, today we all, people who believe in the rapture kind of think of it as this glorious homecoming where the righteous get sucked up into heaven. Well, Matthew 24, Jesus says the exact opposite. He talks about the wicked being taken and the righteous being left behind. So, hey, maybe we'll have something like that happen, and that could improve a lot of things around here dramatically if all the wicked by Jesus's terms were removed from the earth. Maybe he takes them for some one-on-one therapy, which would be wonderful for them. I really want that for them. But I don't think there's going to be any kind of a rapture ever, and I certainly don't think it's going to take place this week. I think rapture doctrines are typically us trying to find a way out of our responsibility of fixing the mess that we've made. we've made such a mess of the earth. We've made such a mess of our lives. We've made such a mess of our relationships. We've certainly made a mess of this country. And this idea that we would all be sucked up into the heavens to eternal bliss relieves us or absolves us of the need to make things right in the here and now. And so I think we ought to spend more time thinking about that. How do we make things right? That's what Good Neighbor Politics is all about. How do we build a better country for everyone who lives in it? How do we stop focusing on the right and the left and just be human beings together who are doing the best that we can without the labels, without the finger pointing, just trying to make life better for everybody? But when you start thinking about rapture, one of the things that comes to mind, I was traumatized as a kid. My dad was really into the whole rapture thing and the end times. And I remember a preacher named Hilton Sutton that my dad really liked, wrote a lot of books, end times prophecy type stuff. And it was really traumatic for me. And so every time I hear about that, I start thinking about the Antichrist, because the original pre-trib rapture folks that I was raised around believed that the Antichrist would rise, and right before he took over the world, Jesus would just suck all the good people up to heaven to be with him. I'm sorry, not good people, true believers, up to the sky to be with him forever, saving us from this tribulation, the 7 years of misery and torment. Maybe like me, you're wondering if we're not already in the Great Tribulation, but that's a rabbit trail I won't chase at this point. So I was traumatized by that kind of doctrine as a kid. Some of you probably were too. So every time I hear about a rapture, I'm like, well, where's the Antichrist? And so there's been so many Antichrists. You know, Pope John Paul was supposed to be the Antichrist for some people. Pope Francis was going to be the Antichrist. Queen Elizabeth, I was told, was the Antichrist for some time. People started to think Princess Diana might be because she was so compelling and people would win her over so quickly. I remember Gorbachev, who was the the Secretary General of the Soviet Union, old Russia, the Union of Socialist Republics. He had a birthmark on his forehead, and people were like, "Oh, there it is, the mark of the beast, right there on his forehead." And so I was traumatized by that stuff. But I don't, after studying the Bible for 20 years, taking it very seriously, I don't think the Bible actually talks about any one person being the Antichrist. And so I titled this episode, Rapture Alert, Is Trump the Antichrist? Kind of tongue-in-cheek. I don't believe he's the Antichrist, but I do believe he is an Antichrist. I believe that he is a polar opposite of Jesus in so many ways, and that was put vividly on display over this past weekend at Charlie Kirk's memorial service, when the President of the United States said that he doesn't love his enemies, that he doesn't forgive his enemies, and he doesn't want the best for them. He wants to punish them. That is the opposite of Jesus. And I wish that all the Christians who are cheering this man on, and listen, he's just a flawed man. He's deceived. I don't believe he's evil. I don't think he's full of demons or anything like that. I just believe he's wrong. And I think he's full of himself. And he's got such a big ego that it leads him down a very destructive path of marking everybody that doesn't agree with him as an enemy. And the people who rally to his cause are seeing enemies where they should be seeing brothers and sisters. The reality is we are all part of this human family. We've all got to get through this thing together. But that's really hard to do when you got somebody so influential pointing a finger saying they are the enemy and they must be destroyed, and othering the other side that doesn't agree with them. I wish the people who rally to Trump's defense, who are serious Christians, and they do exist. I know it's easy to be dismissive and say, you know, nobody who's really a Christian would follow that man. But I know too many of them who I genuinely believe love Jesus with all their hearts, but they've bought into a false gospel of conservatism, or MAGA. Really, MAGA's not conservative. It's really not. And if you don't believe that, check out Heather Cox Richardson. She talks a lot about this. She did a great episode recently of the, what podcast was it? Pod Save America. She did an interview where she talked a lot about how MAGA is not conservative. Donald Trump is not a conservative. Based on the original definitions of conservative, he's nowhere near conservative. It's all about the finger pointing. It's all about the otherization of half the country, really more than that now. If you look at the most recent polls, Trump is very unpopular. He's got about a 60% disapproval rating. People are rejecting the tariffs. They're rejecting the military going into American cities. They're rejecting this bizarre cast of characters that he's turned into the cabinet of the White House of the United States of America. And I wish that people who follow Jesus truly could answer this question for me. And if you're watching, please leave a comment in the comment section. I would genuinely love to hear from you. I would love for you to tell me, what attribute of Jesus of Nazareth do you see put on display in the life of Donald J. Trump? What is the attribute? What makes him Christ-like in your mind? And I know it's so easy to just say, well, we were electing a president, not a preacher. But if Jesus has captured your heart, if you live by the teachings and message and life and death and potential resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth, what is it about Donald Trump that reminds you of that man, of the message of Jesus? Because Jesus said over and over again, why do you call me Lord when you don't do what I say? You don't want to be like me, so why do you claim to follow me? He talked about in the end times, the love of many will grow cold. And when I hear that, I think of so many conservative leaders who've said things like apathy is a disease. Apathy is to be avoided. Empathy is a disease. Empathy should be avoided. Apathy actually should be. Empathy is what the conservatives are saying is the enemy. We don't need to have empathy. Empathy makes us sympathetic towards the needs of others, and then we care about what they need. No, empathy is exactly what we need, and empathy is exactly what Jesus had. The Bible talks about him being moved with compassion before he'd heal the sick or raise the dead. He stood there with Lazarus' sisters in one gospel story and started crying because of the pain in his heart, and was moved by that to raise Lazarus from the dead. Now, again, some of you are listening and you're like, I don't believe any of that stuff. Okay, fine. If you don't believe it, that's fine. I'm not talking to you in this particular episode. I'm talking to those who say, I am a follower of Jesus. I am a Christian. I'm born again. I'm an evangelical, but I support Donald Trump. And I'm here to say today, that is a contradiction in terms. I'm not saying you're not a saved or not a Christian. I'm saying you've got a divided heart, because Jesus and Donald Trump are diametrically opposed. God casts down the proud and he uplifts the humble. What is it about Donald Trump that you think displays humility? When Jesus told a story that we all call the Good Samaritan, he literally chose the most disgusting reject of the society he was speaking to. He was speaking to Jews in Israel, and he picked the Samaritan, who were their mortal enemies, and made him the hero of the story. Jesus wasn't pointing fingers. He wasn't othering. He was calling us to see the humanness inside of each other and realize that we all share this human family, and maybe we ought to stop vilifying each other and start looking for the good in one another. And I'm doing it. It's hard. It's very hard, but I'm trying so hard with President Trump. He made a statement a couple of weeks ago about he was trying to get to heaven. He had disappeared from the public scene for a few days. People thought maybe he had some health issues, maybe a heart problem. Those were just rumors. And a lot of people were like, oh my goodness, this could be it. Donald Trump may be in failing health. And he talked about how he's just trying to get to heaven. And I thought, well, maybe he's had a wake-up call. But then he goes to the Kirk Memorial and says what he said. And he blows up a boat that he thinks might have had some drug dealers on it who were actually heading away from our country, but he dropped a bomb and killed 11 people with no trial, and that should scare you to death. So I don't demonize the man, but his policies are wicked. And he is a type of leader that is opposed to the life and message of Jesus. Jesus was all about love. He was all about compassion. He was all about loving your neighbor, including those that make themselves out to be your enemy. And he called us to live a very different life than the modern MAGA movement paints. Now, listen, I'm not saying that progressives have it all figured out. They certainly don't. I was furious with Joe Biden about the handling of the situation in Gaza. Furious with him. I believe personally, and you'll hear more about this on the next episode, I personally believe that Gaza cost Kamala Harris the 2024 election. She lost, I believe, because of Gaza and a string of other things that didn't differentiate her enough from Donald Trump. And so people just voted for the one they thought would handle the economy better. Now, they regret that. There's serious buyer's remorse now that Trump has tanked the economy with his tariffs. Everything's more expensive than it was in the 2024 election. He said on day one he was going to solve the grocery problem. You remember when he talked about groceries prices? And he talked about it like, oh my gosh. Do you remember? He would talk about groceries as if he just invented the term. Well, it's a very old-fashioned word. Like he just pulled it out of the past and had to re-educate everybody to what groceries meant. No, he had never gone grocery shopping in his life. But he was convincing people that on day one, the price of eggs and beef and bread would go down. And of course, that's been the opposite of the truth. So if you follow Jesus and you're serious about it, if you're serious about a life of love, if you're serious about loving your enemies, if you're serious about turning the other cheek, if you're serious about second chances, then you need to get off the Trump train. Because that's not where Jesus is. Jesus is in the inner cities being persecuted by ICE. Jesus is with those who are being deported to other countries that they've never lived in. Jesus is with the mother who's being ripped away from her children. Jesus is with those who are suffering from horrible illnesses and disease while the Trump administration destroys health and human services, defunds Medicaid and Medicare, and raises health insurance premiums for most of the country in 2026. Jesus is with those who are having their food stamps ripped away next year. And he's with those who are grieving the loss of so many to gun violence. So is Donald Trump the Antichrist? No. But he is a picture of an Antichrist. He's what the opposite of Jesus' life and message looks like. And I think we need to start taking that more seriously. The reality is, Jesus said in Luke chapter 4 that he came to proclaim the year of God's favor, that it was God's chosen time to act, to set things right. He talked about breaking the chains of oppression. He talked about healing the sick. He talked about setting people free on the inside and the out. He talked about a life of loving your enemies, which meant that you won't have any enemies. And so we need to stop being blinded. We're in these blinders. They could be nationalist blinders. They can be conservative blinders. They can be progressive blinders. We need to take the blinders off and stop seeing enemies where we should be seeing friends and brothers and sisters. That's the heart of Jesus. That's what it's really all about. And so, again, as we go through this next couple of days of rapture drills, do y'all remember those? Back in the Pentecostal churches that I would be raised in, we'd visit some. We had one that was just really bizarre, where they would literally have you like jumping up in the air, and they called those rapture drills. They did that in children's church. They had all of us jumping up in the air. I was terrified of the rapture. I was terrified that I wouldn't get to go to heaven, that my parents were going to be snatched up into heaven and I would be left behind to deal with the Antichrist and the Great Tribulation without them. I thank God that was not the case. And I don't think it's going to be the case in these next few days either. But I do believe we've got some work to do. We've got some work to do to heal the earth. We've got some work to do to heal our relationships with each other. And we've certainly got some work to do to heal our country. If we're going to be about the mission of Jesus as revealed in Luke chapter 4, then we need to start setting some captives free. We need to start seeing some people freed from their debt. A lot of conservatives were against student loans being canceled. We need to start helping set people free from medical debt. You should not go into bankruptcy because you got sick with an illness you couldn't afford. We need to be doing what every other modern country in the world has done, and that is providing health care for every citizen. I saw an article this past week that said that Christians defend Israel because of Israel is basically the country they want. Here's one problem with that. Israel has universal health care, and we don't. So if you really want to be like Israel, let's get universal health care in here. Take care of one another. Healthcare should not be for profit. Medication that you need to live should not be for profit. The medication that treats cancer needs to be funded by the government in order for it to be available freely to those who need it most. We ought to be feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, healing the sick. We ought to be providing homes to people who are without homes. We ought to be having mercy on people who don't even believe themselves to be worthy of mercy. And I'm not trying to preach a sermon here. It's just a podcast. I know I get riled up. But I think we've got some repenting to do. Maybe we need to repent from our MAGA beliefs, our conservative beliefs. Listen, I grew up very conservative, voted for George W. Bush twice, 2 different times. Second time was begrudging, but I just couldn't handle John Kerry. Then I went libertarian for a while, and then I went progressive, and now I'm whatever in the world I am now. I hope I'm just a good neighbor politics kind of guy. I want to see the common good. I want to see universal health care. I want to see free college education because education is the silver bullet that lifts people out of poverty. I want to see food get to the people who need it most. And I want to see us stop pointing fingers at one another and learn to live side by side in love and harmony. I know that sounds like a pipe dream, but I really believe that can work. I believe it can work here in the United States of America. I believe it can work in Gaza. I believe it can work around the world. Are we going to have some tough times between now and then? We absolutely will. But I think in the midst of the toughest times are when true character gets put on display. So it's time for us, if we're calling ourselves Christians, if we are, and if you're not, that's fine. I'm not here to proselytize or convince you of anything. Some of my best friends in the world are not Christians. I don't think ultimately it matters because I think we come from love. I think we're made of love, and we will one day return to love. And I think love is what it's all about. Jesus told this story about God, and he said, why do you think that you're good, but you think God is evil? Which of you, being a good father, if your son asks for bread, would give him a serpent or a stone? You wouldn't do that. But we think God, who is a good father or mother, would punish their children for all eternity in a lake of fire. And Jesus was like, you don't know who you're talking about when you talk about God that way. And so ultimately, I don't think the religious path that you choose is what matters. I think it's how we love our neighbor. It's how we treat one another. Jesus didn't go around converting anybody to a religion. He said, love your neighbor. He said, turn the other cheek. He was 100% nonviolent. That's why he died. Some people tried to make him king by force. And this is a word for my Christian nationalist friends. Jesus had an opportunity to be the king, and he didn't take it. Why? They tried to make him king. by force. They want to put a crown on his head and push him out there and say, "You're our king now." And the scriptures say that he passed through them and got away. Why? He didn't want that. Political power was not what he was all about. He came to transcend politics with a life of love and sacrifice. And that's the same life of sacrifice and love that we're called to today, those of us who follow him. And again, listen, if you're not a Christian, if you don't subscribe to the scriptures or any of that, I've struggled with all of that stuff for years. I came through my deconstruction period, still very much believing in Jesus, still believing that he's real. But I don't hold anybody else to that standard. And I want the best for you. I want you to have the home you need. I want you to have the food you need. I want you to have the health care that you need. And I want you to have the love that you need to live in this world. And I want you to have clean air to breathe and clean water to drink. And that's what Good Neighbor Politics is all about. We're going to pick this up again next week. I hope you'll join me. Every Monday, new video, podcast, and blog post all come to the website right here on Substack. And I look forward to seeing you again there. I would love to hear from you. Those of you who disagree with me, I'd love to hear from you. Those of you who agree, I'd love to hear your insights as well. We're certainly not limited to what I talk about here, but I would love to hear from you in the comments, on YouTube, wherever you want to speak to these issues. I'd love to hear it. What's your take on the rapture? What's your take on the Antichrist? Do you see something of Jesus in Donald Trump's leadership in this country? Love to hear about it. I hope you guys have a great night.